we're heading all the way back to where it started for Marvel's first family, the Fantastic Four. We're checking out some of the biggest key issues that shaped the team, plus a few and you might have missed along the way. We'll break down their highest sales, current fair market values, and what the CGC census says about these books right now. And with the next MCU Fantastic Four next steps moving on the way, there's no better moment to see which keys might be ready for their next big move in the market. So buckle up, because it's clobbering time. What is going on, everybody, and welcome to the IzzyVerse. Welcome to Comic Book Spotlight. We're going to be spotlighting the Fantastic Four just in time for the new MCU movie, Fantastic Four First Steps. This is going to be a fun one. I have someone in our group right here in our chat that's going to be talking to us a little bit about it. He's going to show some of his books as well, so that's going to be fun. But before we do that, I just want you to take this opportunity, if this is your first time, like the channel, subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the content. I have a lot more stuff coming on along the horizon. We got trending comic books. We got more spotlights on the way. And check out all the previous videos that are there meant for you to enjoy. So it's time to welcome to the party our guest. And we got Joe Anachronic Comics in the house.
Nobody ever shot machine guns. Fantastic, Izzy. Thank you so much.
Nothing like John McClane welcoming you.
Fantastic. Four.
So, Joe, you reached out to me when I said, "Hey, I'm looking for someone that would like to talk a little bit about Fantastic Four." You were the first person to come up to me and say, "Yeah, I want to talk about Fantastic Four." Now I want to know why you want to talk about Fantastic Four.
Well, Izzy, the thing about it is, I'm a little bit older than you. And
just a little, right? Just a little.
Just a little. So when I first really got into comics was around 1960, and, I was reading Superman, Batman. When Justice League came up, I was very excited about it. And as the story goes, Marty Goodman was speaking to the DC guys and says to Stan Lee, give me a group superhero because the Justice League's making a lot of money. Well, then the Fantastic Four came out. And, some of these things were a little bit slow to pick up, but the Fantastic Four was so great because as it started out, no costumes. Then they got the costumes. Then they had all this great science stuff. And it just was basically science fiction, a lot of it. And for me, science fiction was great. And in those days, the Fantastic Four was the greatest comic book magazine that existed. Much better than Avengers. I loved. I have a big Avengers collection that I bought as a kid. X-Men also, and Amazing Spider-Man was somebody I picked up a little bit later on because someone said, "Hey, what about Spider-Man?" I said, "Who's that?" But Fantastic Four is really the essence. And to me, it seemed like that was really where Lee and Kirby, kind of shone when they were putting their stuff together. A lot of the other books were great too, but that was the one that everybody went back to, and they had X-Men, they had the Avengers, all do guest spots. And the reason for that was that they wanted to give him exposure. As I remember, the guest spots weren't the reverse, pretty much. People guest spotted in the Fantastic Four comic book magazine.
Yeah, and one of the things I always notice about the Fantastic Four in general, especially during that Kirby Lee run, was the amount of new first appearances. As I was doing this list and gathering these books together, there are books that we're going to miss out. I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to do the first appearance of Adam Warlock, even though I am a huge Adam Warlock fan. And I have my copy up there signed by Stan Lee himself. But there are certain comic books that they have that really just opened the door to a new doorway within the Marvel universe. So they were really the flagship, more so than even Spider-Man. Spider-Man became the flagship character or the mascot But the flagship title was Fantastic Four for a very, very long time until, after time progressed and, Stan went to do his thing. Kirby went to do his thing with DC afterwards. Fantastic Four kind of took a back seat to all the other bombastic characters that included the X-Men, Spider-Man, even for a little while, some Avengers books as well. But really towards the late 70s, 80s, and even into the 90s, it was all about the X-Men. It was all about Spider-Man, where all these other characters, Fantastic Four and Avengers, was like, eh.
Yeah, but once Lee and Kirby dropped out, it seemed that they didn't have the same type of creative team there. Because when I came back into collecting, I did pick up some of the books from the 80s and the 90s, and I didn't like them at all. I said, what kind of story is this? I couldn't pick up on it. It didn't seem really good to me. But then again, I didn't do a deep dive. I understand the Byrne stuff was good, but I didn't really get into it that much. But that's one of the reasons when people were saying, the new Superman movie's coming out, and I did see it and I really liked it. And people peg me as a DC guy, but I tell them, you don't understand. In the 60s, although I did buy DC, primarily Justice League of America, I was a big Marvel guy. I collected almost exclusively Marvel stuff. And when the Fantastic Four movie was announced, I'm really excited to go see it. So I can't wait to see it. And I'm hoping that because it's a 1960s, quote unquote, like Silver Age type of movie. Yeah. I'm hoping that it kind of rekindles some of the stuff that I saw in the books that I bought as a kid back in the 1960s. So
I certainly hope so, right? Certainly hope so. So let's go into this list. Let's start it off. Obviously, we're going to be looking at some top keys. I want to give a shout out to Go Collect. In the next couple of weeks, there will be an article with these books here. I might include some more things in there as well. But be on the lookout for the article on Go Collect, in which they help sponsor this channel. They help sponsor this video. Let's go right into the beginning of it all with Fantastic Four #1. This book came out in 1961. High sale of this book was $2.04 million. And that was in September of 2024. Last this book was $16,200 at a 4.0. The raws are going for about $3,800 at a fair poor condition. So we're looking at that as the average when we talk about fair market values. And the average grade is a 3.0, and that goes for $9,600. There's currently 3,134 copies in the census. We already talked about this being the first appearance of Fantastic Four. This is also their origin story. This is also the first appearance of Mole Man, who's their first villain. But what's more important, I think this is what really stands out about this book, is that this is the first comic published under the new Marvel Comics moniker. Before that, it was Time Atlas. And now they went and said, we're calling ourselves Marvel Comics. And this was the first book to kick it off. So you talked to me a little bit about, Fantastic Four. Tell me why this book is kind of like the start of it all, why this was the one.
Well, I have a really negative on this book, though. Let me start with that. And that is that I didn't buy it when I was a kid. So I don't have it in my collection.
The one that got away, right?
A few of them got away, a few of them got away as we go through them. But to me, the thing that when you first saw this and you heard about it, and then you go ahead and you buy it or you read it from somebody else, it was just so different, if you look, and again, it was basically almost the spawn of Justice League of America, because Marty Goodman had heard that it was selling so well. He had asked Stan Lee, give me a multiple hero type of comic book. So, but when you look at it, it looks like the illegitimate child of the Justice League, because it's nothing like it. Those books on DC side were formulaic. It was basically the same type of story. Different villains, but the people like teamed up 2 by 2. You could almost tell how it was going to work out. This you couldn't. The stories were unique. The villains, as we went ahead, were unique. Mole Man, I don't know how unique he was, but the whole idea of it and the way that it worked out, and the fact that they got their powers in space, but now the evildoer was from under the earth. Think about it. You're going from the center of the earth to outer space. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Another thing that really stood out, now that you mentioned it, was with the superhero books, the team books that were happening prior to Fantastic Four, they really were team up books.
Yeah.
right? Where it was a book about a lot of superheroes. They're getting together to deal with this ultra villain that they can't handle by themselves. So they got to get together to form this team or some major threat. Where in the Fantastic Four case, it wasn't like that.
Right.
Fantastic Four case, this is a family. That's why they call the first family.
Right.
This is just a family, a dysfunctional family, no less, that they just happened to be in the wrong place in the wrong time, or the right place in the right time, depending on how you look at it, right? And they still became they were still a family even after this explosion or this, incident occurred, and they decided to take this power for good, and therefore you have the superhero team.
Right, and they bickered like families and so forth. And the interesting thing about it was when they came out, and because you mentioned this, yeah, these superheroes. Let's go look to DC because that was really the essence of it at the time. At the time in 1961, these heroes didn't have their own magazines. I mean, the Human Torch finally got one. Like, I think it was Strange Tales. He started having his own stories in there. He did a lot of guest appearances on Spider-Man and that type of stuff. But they came in as a group to start off with. All right. So, I mean, you might have to go. I don't even know if that worked with the Justice Society way back. Probably not, because a lot of them had their own comic books. But that was unique as well. So that was kind of another unique aspect of it was this is the place you went to see these heroes. You couldn't go anywhere else.
Yeah, the only thing I could remotely even consider similar, and it's even that's not similar, is the Marvel family, the Captain Marvel family, where you got, Captain Marvel Shazam, then you got, Mary Marvel, but those were more derivative characters.
Yes.
That came out of Shazam, not right at the start, where Fantastic Four right at the start, this is a family more than a team.
Yes.
But this is a team book, no less. So it became something very differently. One of the things you mentioned earlier, which is something interesting about this, is that they didn't get their costumes, their traditional costumes, until 2 issues later, in our next book that we're going to cover here. And that is Fantastic Four number 3, which came out in 1961 with a high sale of $102,000 and $9.4. That was in April 2022. Last sale of this book was $360 at the good. The fair market value for a fair poor condition is $379, while 3.5s are going for $962. There's currently 1,636 copies in the census. This is where they get their costumes. This is where we get the Fantastic Car. This is where we get the Fantastic Copper. I like saying Copper. And this is the first appearance of the Baxter Building as well. So this kind of like blew it out. And then we also have the nice big sign saying the greatest comic magazine in the world. What a way to sell this comic book. Talk to me a little bit about this part with the Fantastic Car, with all the gadgetry that's going on here. Obviously, there's something to talk about, especially during this time with the space age.
Well, and they got me because I got that book here.
Let's do that solo. Look at that thing.
There it is. I'd say it's probably, let me see. I would say it's not bad. Probably between a 3 and a 4. Because we didn't take care of our comics in those days, so that's not a bad thing. But when I saw this cover, wow! I looked at it, and it certainly. I mean, remember, was a big science fiction guy. I used to read science fiction books like crazy, And when I saw this, it was just right up my alley, and it just endeared me to them. All right. I may not have bought number 1 or number 2, but when I saw this one, I said to myself, I got to pick this up. And just the story about the way that they went about it. And the Baxter Building was the part that really amazed me because of the way later on, in one of the annuals, they give you a whole outline of the Baxter Building and all that. But the fact that they had their own building, and all the different labs and everything that they had there. And you mentioned they were a family. They lived there as a family. But the uniforms, the Fantastic Car, the whole thing, and they called it a hideout. Yeah, there it is on the cover. So when we were kids, we had our own hideouts. We used to find this space. So to me, that was more endearing to me. Like, oh, we have our hideout. We had different places that we would like against. These used to be our hideouts. When we used to go against the snowball fights against the kids on Charles Street, we had our hideouts. so that they couldn't catch our stuff. Well, I wanted to see what their hideout was. So although the stories were a bit more, let's say, intricate, I won't say adult, but more significant, Lee and Kirby were able to make it appealing to a wide range of individuals, from the kid who has his hideout to the potentially teenage or older science fiction reader that sees this stuff and says, wow, let me see what this is all about. And when you get into the story is just fantastic. It gets you.
Yeah. One of the things I really like, especially when it comes to Kirby style, some people don't understand Kirby and why Kirby is considered the king of comics. This is a perfect example of how good Kirby is. Prior to these comic books had a very static, flat appearance to it. If you look at this cover itself, you could see the energy that's flowing through it just by the way he's taking the Human Torch. And you could actually envision Human Torch jumping off of the Fantastic car to fly over it. And you see that. You don't see that in other comic books prior to the Fantastic Four. Kirby had this is Kirby at his best right now.
Kirby did two things that I like. This is one of them. You hit right on it. This is almost like a 3D cover because you see the building in the background as well, and with Human Torch coming out. The other thing is the splash pages.
Yes,
he was the king of splash page. The 2-page thing or whatever, or even a 1-pager, but the 2 pages were amazing. So you're right. This is one of the things that he excelled at. And look at it. It's basically as best as you can get a 3D out of a 2D piece of paper.
Exactly. It pops out. And, say what you want to say about his anatomy. His anatomy is really not, to be completely honest, his anatomy really wasn't that great. But no one's talking about his anatomy the same way they talk about his energy. And that's what made Kirby the king. You could look at other people that were out there that their anatomies were a lot better, but their images were flat. They didn't have any movement. They didn't feel like they were popping out of the page. It was just nice pictures. Where in Kirby's case, alongside Stan Lee's writing, because let's say he can't. A lot of people talk a lot like who really wrote the Fantastic Four? Was it Kirby? Was it Stan? I'm not here to debate that, but Stan Lee was the dialogue man, and he understood how to sell a comic book and be a salesman in the process. Because look at this, all those word balloons, man. Just the Fantastic Car, the Fantastic Four costumes, and then that nice big, the greatest comic magazine in the world. That was Stan Lee written all over it. And that's what makes this book stands out more so than issue 1, because issue 1, I think, is a great book cover. I think this is a better cover.
But how could you avoid not buying this magazine when it's the greatest comic magazine in the world?
No, you got to know why, right?
Not to buy it. You
got to know why. And let's go on and move on, because what I really am digging here is how they're marrying the what we consider, they like to call it the Marvel age, but they're going to marry it with the golden age by bringing back a character from their early days. In fact, one of their very first superheroes or anti-heroes in Namor the Submariner. This is Fantastic Four number 4. It came out in 1962. High sale of this book was $81,000 at 9.6, and that was all the way back in November of 2019. Last sale of this book was $2,280. The Raws are going for about $293 at a fair, poor condition. The graded 5.0 goes for $2,333, and that's the fair market value. CGC census, we got 2,043 in the census. As I mentioned, this is the first Silver Age appearance of Namor the Submariner. And they turn him into this. He's kind of a villain. I guess you could say he's a villain here, but Namor's more than that. He's not your traditional villain. He's more of a misunderstood anti-hero. Talk to me a little bit about Namor and why he's such an important piece to it.
I have that one.
Let's take a look at that one there.
It's actually coverless. So it's a 0.5, but I didn't want to look at the first page all the time, so I printed out a cover for it. So it's,
I was about to say that looks really good in its condition.
I shouldn't have told you that. This is a 9.5, Izzy.
9.5. I don't think that exists.
The thing about this is, and you could bring me back, But the thing about it is that you don't have, if you read the story, and I read it, not, I like reading these books again. That's why I think only one of them is I slabbed. If you read the story, he's found, he's disheveled, he's lost his memory, right? But the key here is that this Fantastic Four are trying to get him to regain his memory. They help him out. They're very friendly. He falls in love with Sue Storm.
Maybe a little too friendly.
Right, a little bit too friendly. But then the thing about it is they basically almost create the evil Submariner, because when they try to get him to find Atlantis, when he finally gets his memory back, he's trying to find Atlantis again, and they help him, and he finds that Atlantis has been destroyed, and he blames the land dwellers and all that, and he decides he's going to get revenge. So that was really the birth of the villain, and so in some ways, the Fantastic Four created him, as the villain. He comes back many times thereafter to try to get back at them and to get Sue.
Yeah, he's always after Sue. Him and Sue, man. Sue, Reed ignores her all the time.
All the time, right.
And she's like, oh, but I'm with Reed, and she's like, yeah, but he's ignoring you.
Don't you want to be queen of Atlantis? Come on.
And I love, we're going to talk a little bit later about Sue and like her metamorphosis and things like that. But I love the fact that there is something to her being at this time, the Invisible Girl.
Right.
Because what made it so interesting to me, I don't know if it was done on purpose or it's just because of its time or something like that. She was known as Invisible Girl when this is a grown adult. Yeah. And she's in a relationship with someone who eventually will become her husband someday, and they're calling her Invisible Girl. And it also takes to account that the powers that she ends up getting is the power of invisibility, because she feels like nobody's seen her. Whoa, which is true.
Izzy, so they psychiatrist here. Look at that.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. 4 years, nothing. But it is something about it, because again, there is some story there is some psychology going on with these characters and who they are and how they interact. Because to be completely frank, Reed Richards is a jerk, and they wrote him as a jerk. Meanwhile, the Thing is probably the most beloved character of the bunch, right. But he's dealing with his own mental health issues because he can't go back. And meanwhile, Johnny's a hothead, and that's why he's. So these are reflections of who they are.
Yeah.
As opposed to, they just gave them, superpowers. No, these superpowers reflect their character, which I think to me, that was Stan and Jack working on it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And Stan was very thoughtful about all of his characters. If you heard or you read some of his interviews later on, he always had a purpose or a thought about why a character was who they were or how they did things. Yeah. So I don't disagree with you. I think, though I never thought about it that way, the power of invisibility kind of fits very well.
No one, she's always there. No one sees her, even when you can see her.
Yeah.
So why not turn her into the Invisible Girl and then call her girl when she's a woman?
Yeah, but that was kind of standard back in those days.
Yeah, I know at that time. But then, when we get to John Byrne kind of addresses that whole girl versus woman situation, which I think is a really good point that he made. All right, now we're going to go to a big one, because issue 4 was pretty good, but the big one gave us Doom, and this came out in 1962. Last sale of the high sale of this book is $180,000 and 9.2. That was in September 2022. Last sale of this book was $6,000 at 4.5. The Raws are going for about $1,000 in that fair poor condition. Graded 3.5 is the average at $4,680. There's 2,510 copies in the census. We got ourselves the first appearance and the origin of the main villain to the Fantastic Four, Victor Von Doom, Dr. Doom, if you're nasty. Talk to me about the importance of who Dr. Doom really is.
Well, the interesting thing, I don't have this book. I didn't get this book. I didn't buy it. Or if I did, I must have given it to somebody, because I don't have it here now. But interestingly, and I'll give you my own personal perspective. When Doom came out, I didn't pay him a lot of mind, because my head was more into the older heroes coming in. I thought the Submariner was significant because I knew about his Golden Age, appearances and so forth. And I knew they were trying to play Doom up as being somebody special. And when I remember reading the story years and years ago, I said, "Oh, what interesting character and all that." Little did I know that he would grow into who he was. And not only that, he made multiple appearances over the next 10 or 20 issues in the Fantastic Four. I mean, he was constantly there, fighting the Fantastic Four, either by himself or with the Submariner or with somebody else. And I know we're going to talk about some of the other books later on, but he just kind of grew into, I think, what Stan and maybe Jack had planned for him. They were looking for the file, like the Luthor or the Brainiac or whatever for the Fantastic Four. And I think they were thinking about Submariner, which kind of filled a little bit of that role. But I think they developed him on purpose in retrospect. I didn't know at the time to become that super foil for them.
I could see that. And with Submariner, I think what they created was a sympathetic character, where in Doctor Doom, it's hard to be sympathetic with Dr. Doom.
Right.
Because he's a very interesting, very unique villain. In fact, many people claim him to be the greatest villain of all time. The only other person that probably matches him as far as, that will be like Joker or the Luthor. But with Dr. Doom, what makes him so interesting is that he is three-dimensional. He's a three-dimensional villain where at a time they didn't exist. Every villain was kind of like, hokey, I'm going to take over the world. And Dr. Doom was that too, don't get me wrong. But there was a side to him that understood why. And I think I'm looking forward to the MCU take on Dr. Doom, even though I'm not happy that it's Robert Downey Jr. Nothing against Robert Downey Jr. I always envision Dr. Doom being his own thing and not being related to something else.
Agreed.
Which kind of throws me off, but I'm willing to see where they take this, right? Because it's a whole multiverse thing, right? But with Dr. Doom, I think what's interesting enough is that he is every evil dictator we know. You know what I'm saying? So if you when you talk about dictators in this world, Dr. Doom is that, because the people of Latveria absolutely love him because he takes care of them. The only thing is that he's maniacal. You know what I mean? So he's your Hitler, he's your Mussolini, he's your Stalin.
He's psychotic.
Yeah. So there's something deeply flawed in him, but there's also something that's so endearing about him because of his relationship with his mother and the fact that he could outsmart the devil. You know what I'm saying? This is the type of character he is. He is a super genius. He rivals only Reed Richards in his smarts when it comes to that. And that's the thing. And the other thing about him, which I'll let you continue and let me know your opinion on it, is where Reed is all about science and facts and logic. Doom is that, but also he goes with the mysticism, supernatural, which Reed doesn't understand. And Doom fully embraces it as well as science. So talk to me a little bit more about that.
I don't disagree with that. The only thing that I would say is, at least in this story, as I remember it, it's been a while since I read it, but as I recall, they were in college together and they were supposed to be roommates, and Doom is developing a machine. I forget what the machine was supposed to do now, but it was prohibited from doing that. Yeah. And Reed opens the door while he's in the middle of doing this thing, which causes the machine to kind of explode and gives him the disfigurements and stuff like that. So it starts off, and that's why I said I didn't pay him a lot of mind, but it starts off like he's wants revenge again. It's a revenge story in the beginning. It only grew as it went along into the super villain, the super foil, the Luthor or Joker type of person for the Fantastic Four as they fully developed him more so. I don't disagree about his relationship with his subjects, but he is psychotic. So you never know what he decides to do or not do. based on just his mental.
But like all dictators before him, right?
Yeah.
They were beloved. That's how they gained their power.
Yeah.
And Doom's no different. The other thing that you mentioned that I forgot to bring up, that's a very important fact about Doom, is the actual Doom that we know, you don't see his face. And the explosion that you mentioned was the part that disfigured his face. But what's the mystery about it is that we don't know if that was a minor scar or a complete disfigurement, because what Stan Lee really wanted to do was bring that shroud of mystery to see how much vein is in him, like how vanity to him, that even just the smallest scar makes him completely disfigured.
Very good point.
And I love that. That's something I think we're gonna miss in this movie, in this upcoming movie with Doomsday. We're gonna miss that part, which kind of there's something important to that, to me, in that character, and we didn't get that in the other movies either, unfortunately, where we don't know. Like, we already knew what his face was gonna look like, but I think there's something to the element of not knowing what kind of disfigurement he thinks it is.
Yeah, correct. When he looks at it and stuff like that, it's always blocked out, so you can't see what his face looks like. Yeah.
Right. Moving on to our next book, we're going to jump into a couple of issues later, and this is an important one because this is the first meeting with the Hulk, and there is some value to this, and that's Fantastic Four issue number 12. It also came out in 1962. This book at a high sale is at $44,600 and 9.6. That was back in June of 2017. Last sale of this book was $4,680 and an 8.5. Raws are going for $434 at good condition. Graded copies go for $1,080 at a 5.0 on average. There's 2,222 copies in the census. I mentioned this is the first meeting with the Hulk, who becomes a major, I guess, what's the word? Not a few rival. There's a rival between Hulk and the Thing, which is a big part. But another thing that's really important about this book is it has a tie with Amazing Spider-Man #1 as being Marvel's first crossover that came out at the same time frame. But they both have Fantastic Four in it. So at this time, the Marvel universe really came into fruition. This was the first time we get all these characters being put together. We're getting the Hulk. We're getting the Thing. They're going to start fighting pretty soon. Not just yet, but this is their first meeting. And more importantly, this is the first crossover event within the Marvel universe as we know it.
Yeah, I just got a couple of things to say about this. First of all, I don't have that one now, but I remember having it or reading it way back when. The fact that there was always this thought that came up about who might be stronger. If you read through some of the letters, in the different magazines, you'll say, well, is the Hulk stronger than the Thing? Because both of us have super strength. So when you saw this, you really thought, oh, maybe we're going to finally find out, but you don't. You don't find out, as I remember, number one. Number two, this was such a key because a Marvel fan like I was back then, and buying X-Men and all stuff like that, and Avengers and some of the other books, some Thor, whatever. Here you finally have this crossover. And when you have this crossover, it brings a whole new dimension to what was already growing as a very significant comic book line and storylines of these, imperfect heroes and in some ways imperfect villains, because sometimes they're not as villainous as you might think they would be. And sometimes they are. So when you see this now, you say, oh, holy moly. It's Shazam. Holy moly. What the heck is going on here? These people are now crossing over. So they live next to each other, New York City. They can interact. I wasn't aware of Spider-Man at the time, but obviously it's another scenario where they now can interact. And some of it was forced in some ways. But yet the whole idea was very significant and very exciting to us guys back in the 60s.
And it makes sense with Stan Lee doing most of the writing, usually with Kirby involved. Ditko involved. It was a very small, tight-knit group of guys getting together and said, "Yeah, we're putting these characters together and making a universe," which that was happening. This is the first Marvel universe that occurred in this book with Amazing Spider-Man. It's just interesting enough that it was also with the Fantastic Four, which I think that shows the significance of the Fantastic Four
World's
at that
greatest
time.
comic magazine.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to a book here that I think a lot of people are not as familiar with, but they should. And that's the very next issue with Fantastic Four 13. This has a high sale of $31,200, and that was in January of 2022. Last sale, this book was $276 at a 3.0. The Raws goes for about $274 at a very fine condition. $575 at a 5.0. There's currently 1,540 copies in the census. This features two first appearance of the Watcher and the first appearance of Red Ghost. So let's talk a little bit about these two characters. I think one is way more significant than the other, and I'm talking about Red Ghost. I'm kidding, of course. Let's talk a little bit about these characters, Red Ghost and the Watcher. So take it away.
I have to kind of admit I don't remember this story, although I do have the book.
Yes, there it is.
I have the book here. It's probably more like about a 3.0, 2.530, I would say, something like that.
Yeah.
And the significance of the Watcher is kind of obvious now. He's become kind of a star in his own right, even with the animated series, right? The What If series, But obviously, what happens later on in the Fantastic Four, makes it even more significant. So in this instance here, the thing that grabbed me about this, and remember in those days I wasn't looking to collect necessarily, so I would go to the store and I saw a comic I liked, I would buy it.
Yeah.
Look at the cover. They're walking on the damn moon, for Pete's sakes.
Yeah. And without helmets.
Yeah. What the hell's going on? So I wanted to see maybe they got new powers. They can do this now. They don't need any air. And even the torch, he can flame up without any oxygen. I mean, so obviously it's representative. And the Red Ghost coming up like that and being on the moon is just another great Kirby cover that makes you want to buy the book. Now, I don't remember the story. If you know the story, let me know, 'cause maybe you'll jog my memory.
Yeah, I can't tell you the story. What I can tell you is this. The Red Ghost was slated to be in the Fantastic Four movie, and it was going to be played by John Malkovich.
That's right. I heard that.
So they made the announcement that John Malkovich was going to be in the movie. He's actually in the first trailer of the movie. But they made the decision, I guess, later on to say, his story just doesn't fit. It's too much going on. So we are removing him from the story. That to me states that I do feel like we're going to get Watcher. And Watcher is so significant to what this movie is going to be about, since we're going to talk about that a little later when we get to those books. So I do believe we're going to see the Watcher in some way. And I think not having the Red Ghost in the movie is a good thing, because then it's like, where are you going to place him? And not even that, it's just you're going to take an actor by the caliber of John Malkovich and give him 2 minutes to shine, and that's it, and then let him go on his merry way. That just doesn't seem right, and it doesn't seem fair. So I'm in favor of it. If we don't get, and then let's be honest, who's crazy for a Red Ghost comic? You know what I mean? Red Ghost story. I am excited to see Mole Man, and there are images of Mole Man already, which I thought was funny when I saw it. So we'll see Mole Man soon. And we'll see a little bit about that story, but I'm sure that's going to be an early part of the story. He might be a villain that just pops up and then you just take care of him, and that's that. And that's exactly how I want Mole Man to show up anyway.
Exactly.
But with Watcher, we're going to the Watcher. The character of the Watcher is a very intricate character because he's always a supporting character. He's like the ultimate supporting character because his whole thing is to watch, to monitor, to record. He does a pretty bad job at it, let's be honest.
Yeah.
But because he always gets involved, even though he always says he doesn't want to, but he's like, yeah, I got to get involved. Like what, millions of people are dying. He doesn't get involved. But at this moment, no, I got to show up. You know what I mean? Where were you in Endgame? I'm just saying.
Correct.
So with the Watcher and his first appearance being here, Why is the Watcher such an important character, especially when it comes to Fantastic Four? What do you think it would be that reason?
I think he's more of a that's an interesting question. I don't know if I ever thought about it that way, but I think he's more of a consciousness, like,
Mhm,
giving them the ability to make up their own minds
mhm.
by throwing stuff at him or interacting with him. And he's saying, well, it's almost like a psychiatrist says, well, what do you think?
Yeah.
What do you think? Because his whole point, as you said, was, although he doesn't follow it all the time, is look, I can't do anything. I'm just recording. I'm just watching. And they will say, yeah, but yeah, well, I'm just watching. So, it's almost like, what do you think? If he's forcing them to take care of what they need to take care of. And
Mhm.
with somebody like Reed, really kind of have him delve into the thing scientifically or what have you, and come up with an answer.
Yeah.
Come up with an answer.
Really interesting character. I like what they did there. All right, we're
Mm.
gonna go back to the Hulk with issue 25. This came out in 1964. High sale of this book was $11,866 and 9.6. That's a really good score.
Yeah.
This happened in March of 2013. This is what happens when you're looking at a smaller screen. Last sale of this book was $219 at a very good. Raw goes about $226 at a very good. So that's about the average. $639 at a 7.0 is the average for the graded comics. There's 1,913 copies in the census, where issue 12 gives us the first meeting, issue 25, which is kind of an anniversary issue when you think about it. It gives us the battle of the century,
Right.
as it says there. The Hulk versus the Thing. And notice how much bigger the Hulk has become.
Hmm.
Talk
Yeah.
to me about that one.
And so I do have that one. So what you do see, though, is that the Hulk does beat up on the Thing. So the Hulk is stronger than the Thing.
Mhm.
But and it's great to kind of see, as it says, super spectacular, page after page of pounding thrills, the battle of the century. You know, but what I recall most about this, and Izzy, you might correct me if I'm wrong, but I also believe that this is the second in this book is the second Silver Age appearance of Captain America. Am I right on that? I think.
You are correct. There's a lot
Okay.
of so that does have some multiple key factors into it
Hmm.
in the book, and you are absolutely correct in saying that it is considered the second appearance of Captain America.
Yeah. So I mean, again, look at the cover on this. I mean, that's the best thing you could take a look at. I mean, you've got the Hulk, and you've got the Thing, and the rest of the Fantastic Four, and the other people are there in the background just because they need to be, because it's a Fantastic Four comic book. But you're looking at them and you're just saying, "How's this going to work?" And I mean, it tells you. I mean, basically, when you take a look at their size, you know that the Hulk is going to beat up on the Thing, and
Mhm.
the Thing really gets beat up a lot. Though he's very I'm going to put the forthright about it, and fights back really well. But the Hulk clearly is stronger than the Thing. That's for
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah, I always found that funny because growing up as a kid, the Fantastic Four was always there already. So I grew up knowing Fantastic Four, knowing the Hulk, knowing how strong the Hulk is, because that's really what makes the Hulk the strongest, because he is one of those characters that's his thing, is strength,
Yeah.
and strength through his anger is what makes him big. I think what makes the Thing an important character is this guy who's dealing with the fact that he is this thing, that so strength is such an important part of his character, but I think what's more important is his actual character than his abilities, really.
Right. And what I remember about this is that the other three members of the Fantastic Four were, I don't know, either hurt or
Mhm,
exhausted or tired.
mhm.
And the Hulk is rampaging through New York because, and he found out that he's being replaced on the Avengers.
Yeah, and that's their third crossover event.
Yeah.
It is the first crossover event with the Avengers, so they're part of this story. And as you said, it's the first Silver Age Cap.
Second.
Second. So
Yeah.
my apologies.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay.
so
Cool.
it's a multi-key book. That's why it's a super spectacular.
That's right.
Stan knows how to write them, right?
I know, that's for sure.
All right, let's move on to our next book in this list, and we're going to jump into issue 45 in 1965.
Big jump.
Yeah, it's a big jump, but it's an important jump. We got a high sale of $45,600 at a 9.8. That was in March of 2023. The last sale of this book was $141 at 5.0. Raws are going for $61 that are very good. 7.0 is the average for the graded copies and averages out at about $366. It's currently 4,302 copies in the census. This is the first appearance of the Inhumans. Now, before we even talk about the Inhumans, one of the things I noticed about the Fantastic Four, and I might have mentioned this before, is how they constantly introduce new characters. Fantastic Four was notorious for always introducing new characters that would span out to do their own thing. The Inhumans being one of them. So let's talk a little bit about the Inhumans. Let's talk a little bit about what's their story when it comes to Fantastic Four.
Well, with the Inhumans, as I remember, there's a whole history that has to do with the Kree and the rest of that type of stuff with respect to their being created. I'm trying to remember this story, and it's been a while since I read it, so I don't remember a lot of the particular story. But the thing I like the most about the Inhumans, well, the thing that I feel bad about the Inhumans is that was it a TV show, which was not very good.
Oh, it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad.
There was a lot of potential there with the different characters, and with was it Black Bolt, I guess?
Bolt, yeah.
Black Bolt as the king, with the king and his voice issues and the rest of that, which the Scarlet Witch took care of very easily in the Doctor Strange movie. But I mean, so there's all these characters. There's Medusa that comes in later, came in even earlier as the Frightful Four. I think she was part of that.
Yeah.
So there's all these different characters, all these different powers, and this basic mythology that's there, that we just haven't been able to replicate in the MCU. I mean, now the big next thing is the X-Men, so nothing's going to happen with the Inhumans. So I think there's a loss there, and I think that TV show really messed them up. And as a result, you're not probably going to see the Inhumans. Unless Fantastic Four does well, you might see them in a Fantastic Four movie, but otherwise you're not going to see them, and that's really a loss for us fans.
I agree. I think the Inhumans very much like the Eternals, and then eventually we'll get to the X-Men. When it comes to the Inhumans, I think they're a society that I think this is more of a Jack Kirby thing more than it was a Stan Lee thing. So the Inhumans are a race that were formed through a Terrigen mist. So they're part of the Kree left the Terrigen mist, and then whenever they got exposed to the Terrigen mist, it exposed what their power sets really are. So they've never been born into it like the mutants were. So the mutants are kind of the outskirts of what the Inhumans are in some way. So there's a lot of similarities, and that's the reason why we see those similarities. But the truth of the matter is, I think what happened here with the Inhumans, especially when it comes to the MCU of it all, is that they were a replacement for the X-Men. And they never really were supposed to be that. So the fact that they created them to be a replacement to something that they couldn't have made people reject them. And more importantly, the TV show didn't help. Because the TV show was poorly written. It had its moments where it wasn't so bad, and I did watch it, but it was just dull. It was boring. It was like a caste system, society and stuff like that, which, imperialism is part of it as well, which I don't know people really cared for as much. And that's kind of where it failed. Even though I do believe the Humans are a great group of people, but like you said before, I think when it comes to MCU, maybe one day we'll see them again, like actually see them, not in like these little roles like in Doctor Strange or something like that. Especially they kind of messed that up with Miss Marvel by turning her into a mutant when she really is an Inhuman. And I would have liked to see that happen. But it is what it is, as they say.
So I do have a copy of it. Among Us Hide the Inhumans. And the next couple of issues, which I know we're not going to go over, also you kind of develop the Inhumans a bit more, which is kind of cool. But look at that. What a great cover that is.
Yeah, that's a nice
I mean,
cover.
just an amazing.
What kind of conditioning you think that book would be where?
This one, I think, is not as good a shape as some of the others. There's a lot of issues with it. I would think it might be maybe no more than a 2 at the most, I would say. So okay.
Well, the next issue is 46, which is the first appearance of Black Bolt, and you have a nice cover there. We're not going to go over that book next, but that is the continuation of the Inhuman story. So they do. Right. There are story arcs that come along with it. Our next book is we're going to go into an annual now, and this annual is very important to the mythos of the Fantastic Four because this is the wedding of Reed and Sue Storm, which is considered a landmark because I can't think of a comic book beforehand that actually has a wedding involved in it. So this may be one of the first wedding books, and stuff like that, in which they just went ahead and said Reed and Sue are getting married, and she's still Invisible Girl. But this is Fantastic Four Annual number 3 that came out in 1965. High sale of this book is $4,440 and 9.8. That was in April of 2025, so just recently. Last sale of this book, believe it or not, was $25 at a fine, and the raws are $28. Very good. 5.0 is the average for $90. And there's 628 copies in the census. And as I mentioned before, this is the wedding of Reed and Sue Storm. They're finally tying the knot in this story. And everybody came to say what's up.
Good and bad.
Good and bad. So let's talk a little bit about this wedding.
Well, when we first found out that they were getting married, being someone that was used to a lot of like either imaginary tales or things that weirdo happened, so that whatever you think would have happened or whatever the cover demonstrated didn't really happen. The fact that this happened was a special occasion for me. I said, wow, they actually did get married. And I'll tell you the one thing I really liked about this particular story, but we mentioned that everybody good and bad came. Yet the decision was made to attack them at the same time. So they had Super Skrull, Puppet Master. It was almost everybody that was in Red Ghost, Electro from Spider-Man. I forget, the Beetle, the Executioner, the Gray Gargoyle, Kang the Conqueror, I think, showed up, if I remember correctly. Yeah. And so what happened was then the Avengers, Daredevil, and the Watcher was there watching, all show up to try to...
Did he have an invitation? That's the real question.
To try to keep everybody out so that Sue and Reed can get married. But the part that I really loved the best, okay, besides that they got married, was, and they did this a number of times, was that Stan and Jack showed up in this book.
Yes.
And if you remember, I think was it in the first Fantastic Four movie?
It was the second one. It was the second
one. Okay.
Yeah, it was the second movie.
Where Stan shows up and he says, but I'm Stan Lee. And they're going, you're not on the list. Well, it was similar. They took it straight from this book because Stan and Jack try to get in, but they're told that they're not on the list. And they can't get into the wedding. So it's really kind of cool. When I saw that was almost, and that was right at the end. That was almost was the best thing in the whole story that was there.
Yeah, and it was they did do that scene in the movie Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. I remember it really well, right towards the early beginning. That's where the surfer pops out of nowhere, and and all that stuff. And you said, "But I'm Stan Lee." And what makes me crack up laughing is that this is fourth wall breaking moment because the creators of the Fantastic Four are there to see the Fantastic Four. But who are they in this world? You know what I'm saying? So, and he's saying, I'm Stan Lee. It's like, yeah, and your point is?
Well, the interesting thing about it, and I can't remember which issue it was, Izzy, but there was one issue early on where Dr. Doom decided, because he was in a bunch of the first 20 issues, right, after he came in, he decided to get Jack Kirby and to a lesser extent Stan Lee to help him defeat the Fantastic Four by luring Reed Richards to their office. And And the interesting thing about it, you said, what's their purpose in here?
Mm-hmm.
You got Stanley talking to Jack saying, hey, you know what? I got to come up with another idea for an issue. Let's call up Reed and see what they've been doing lately so I can get some stories for the next Fantastic Four comic book magazine. And, Jack says, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that. When Dr. Doom, shows up and threatens them with their lives if they don't get Reed Richards to come over. And Reed gets a call and says, yeah, I'll be right over. We'll talk to you about some stuff that you might be able to put in your comic book. So they were there was the comic book writers.
Yeah.
And they wrote Fantastic Four.
That's
and they knew the Fantastic Four.
It's so
Is that amazing?
That's what we call meta in this world.
I know, amazing. Just amazing.
It's a great book. Let's go into our next book here, which is, many believe this might be the most important Fantastic Four book, if not the next book that follows outside the first one. And that is Fantastic Four 48. This book came out in 1966. High sale of this book is $108,000 at 9.8. That was in June of 2021. The last sale of this book was $911 $4.5. The Raws goes for $677 at a very good, while the graded copies at a 4.5 sell for about $906. There's currently 10,499 copies in the census. This is the first appearance of the Silver Surfer. It's also the first cameo appearance of Galactus. This also has a great cover featuring the Watcher. Another thing that's important to note before we even get to talk a little bit about that, you're probably asking yourself, why is there such a high census count? And the answer to that question is quite simple. There was a collection that was found not that long ago where the owner had multiple copies of this book. And as a result, they were submitted. And we're talking about a large quantity of this specific book. This is one of those books that, as crazy as it may sound, it has a higher print run that's out there in really good conditioning too as well. And it's such an important story. So let's talk a little bit about the coming of Galactus and the importance of this book.
Well, I think the importance of this book is pretty obvious in that the Fantastic Four movie basically is the coming and the arrival, I guess, of Galactus.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is the start of the trilogy. An interesting thing about that, I mean, I would watch Reggie Collects quite a bit. And I remember this whole trilogy used to come up all the time. People talk about it. And I hadn't looked up my Fantastic Four comics in a long time. And I found out that I had them, actually had the books, all three books, which were just amazing because I didn't even know that I had them. So here it is, The Coming of Galactus. This is not an awful shape, probably around a 4 with respect to that. And the importance here, I mean, this is really an outgrowth of the prior 3 books, which involved the Inhumans and Maximus, the Mad, I guess they called him, who was the brother of Black Bolt, was really the bad guy here. And they had to kind of defeat him, which they did. He had some sort of gun that was going to produce, certain stuff or whatever. But what happens is once they defeat him and they come back, they see the sky full of flames and the Silver Surfer comes through, and so it's really the start. I don't know that they were that concerned at the top about the Silver Surfer. But when they see Galactus, if I remember correctly, he came out of a ship or something because he could change his size, right? So when they saw him, they realized that there was a problem, and he declares that he's going to consume the world. I believe that's how this first issue ended, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So talking a little bit about Galactus, let's get to that next book, which is 49. Also came out in 66. This has a high sale of $192,000 and 9.8. That was in November of 2022. Last sale, this book was $840 at a 7.5. It actually sells really well. The raw copies are $393, very good conditioning, $483 at a 4.5. 7,142 copies in the census. And now we're getting the full appearance and cover appearance of Galactus. If this be Doomsday, which I like the comparisons that they're doing with the MCU with using the term Doomsday. This is such an iconic cover. Wow. And you got it right there. Look at that.
There it is. There it is. Like this Fantastic Four running away, and you've got Galactus there in green and all that. the other importance of this issue is that the Watcher, who doesn't interfere, tries to interfere. He goes to
he can't help it, right? He's like, I gotta get involved here.
I can't do anything. Okay, wait a minute, I'll do something.
These are the only people I watch, guys. I need to continue watching them.
I only watch the Fantastic Four, and so that's it. So if I remember correctly, the Thing punches out the Silver Surfer. Maybe it was in the other issue. I can't remember exactly when. And so Galactus shows up, and they're trying to say, leave us alone. And the Watcher tries to intercede too, saying, these are pretty good guys. I like watching them. Don't devour their planet. He tries to explain then to the Fantastic Four what would happen if Galactus succeeds in that. And they begin attacking Galactus, but I think if I remember correctly, I think they tried to develop some kind of device that they think can either boost their powers or stop Galactus or something. I can't remember the specifics of it.
So the story, as I recall, is that obviously there's no hope, right?
Yeah.
In what's going to happen. This is all part of natural causes type of thing. So Galactus is one of those strange characters that he's not a villain. He's just a force of nature. He's a force of nature, right? And the way they found it, I think this was the trick, was getting the ultimate nullifier.
Right, that's it. The weapon was on his ship or something like that.
Yeah, right? The ultimate nullifier was the one thing that Galactus says, "Oh no,
kryptonite!"
Not that
Kryptonite.
And all you see is Reed holding it. Like what I know is I see Reed holding it like, "I got it. Don't make me push the button. Yeah. Don't make me push the button." And he's like, "No, I'll leave you alone." Very comic books, right?
Alicia, Ben Grimm's girlfriend, has an important part to play in this too, because when the Silver Surfer comes through, I forget if she was helping him like come back to consciousness or something like that, but she's talking to him, and she's the one that convinces in this issue towards the end to have the Silver Surfer help them defeat Galactus. So that was and remember the Watcher was watching all of this, I guess, and he actually decides to go and confront Galactus himself as well. But
so we mentioned that this is the second of the trilogy. So let's go with the trilogy with the last issue, which issue 50 also came out 66. High sale of this book is $44,000 at 9.8. That was in June of 2013. So that was a while ago. Last sale of this book is $3,120 at 9.2. Raws go for about $154 at a very good, $570 at a 4.5. There's 4,898 copies in the census. This concludes the story of Galactus and Silver Surfer, not the end of Silver Surfer. Silver Surfer then becomes a different type of character, which takes us into cosmic adventures featuring the Silver Surfer, in which I think Silver Surfer is very much a Jack Kirby creation, more so than a Stan Lee creation. I think you're absolutely So let's take a look at that cover.
This is the last of them. There he is. And don't forget that Johnny Storm goes to college in this issue.
Yeah, I always love that part, right? Like all this stuff is like, hey, don't forget,
world ready to explode, but don't forget he goes to college.
Like all stuff, he still has to sign up for college.
Yeah. So the Silver Surfer couldn't, no matter how much he tried, he couldn't defeat Galactus, right? And he tried really hard, but the Watcher had developed some sort of a way to increase the powers of the Human Torch so he can get into Galactus' ship. He gets that nullifier you spoke about, and Reed basically threatens him with it, and Galactus agrees that he's going to leave Earth alone, but then he banishes the Silver Surfer to Earth forever, and leaves. So this issue never was as popular as the first two.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I think because it was almost kind of anticlimactic in some ways.
It almost feels like an epilogue rather than a conclusion.
That's why Johnny went to college.
Yeah, because you got all this stuff. Doomsday's coming, or the coming of Galactus, and you see these two covers that really spell out doom, right? They spell out doom. They're literally telling you this is the most important thing you're going to ever have to read. And then you get to issue 50, another anniversary issue, mind you. And first of all, you got that brown background, which I don't know what was the deal with the brown.
A little weird, right?
Yeah. And then you have, you kind of, you make it lose its purpose when you do say Johnny Storm is going to college.
Because White Wingfoot, White Wingfoot, I think, makes his first appearance. You got to make sure you get him in.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah, by the way, we defeated the Galactus. Now let's just look at Silver Surfer. And Johnny's going to college. Well, so you do this thing and it's so anticlimactic, like you said. It's like, oh, okay. You know what I mean?
Well, wasn't it? I'm trying to remember now, because I probably should have read all these books before the show, but I'm trying to go on memory. As I remember, the press thought that it was all a big hoax.
Mm-hmm.
And so they discounted it completely. And there was then they always brought in the personal things. I think since Alicia was working with the Silver Surfer, the Thing feels that she likes him better.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have a vague recollection of Sue Storm being pissed off at Reed for some reason. But
it's always the case, though.
So, and then he goes to college. I mean, and he meets his Metro University. He meets White Wingfoot, who makes a few appearances in the FF. Mm-hmm. And they meet with the dean. I mean, it just becomes kind of like, okay, back to normal.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. So it didn't have the same gravitas, it seems, that the other two issues had. So it was never as popular, never as expensive, if I recall, as the other two issues as well.
I definitely agree with that. And I think there's better stories featuring the Silver Surfer. This is the start of what we know is going to be a really good run with Silver Surfer. He is one of the great cosmic characters in the Marvel Universe.
Right.
Then we go to our next story. So we're sticking to these issues in order. And I think our next two issues are like a great 1-2 punch that both Jack and Stan did, starting with issue 51 that came out the very next month. High sale of this book is at $5,994.09.6. That was in August of 2015. The last sale of this book was $40 at a very good, which is fantastic price. Raws are going for $43 at very good. Graded copies, $249 at an 8.0 is the average. There's 1,100 copies in the census. This is a classic story. This Man, This Monster, which is a Thing story, which is a great story. But also on the side, as you can see in the image, we got the first appearance of the Negative Zone, which is going to be a big part within the Fantastic Four lore. But let's focus more on the story, This Man, This Monster. Talk to me a little bit more why this story is so important to the mythos of Fantastic Four and really the mythos of the man, Jack Kirby.
Right. So the thing I remember most about this, I mean, the Thing always felt in some ways that, he was cursed. I remember him telling Johnny, why can't I just say Thing on? Like you say flame on,
Yeah, because you don't want to say that, boy.
There's a good point there, Izzy. Good point. But this is a situation where he felt despondent about Alicia's new relationship with the Silver Surfer, although there was really nothing going on there. So he goes out in the next issue and he's just kind of walking around the streets. A man finds him who doesn't like Reed, as I remember. He thinks Reed is a glory hound or something like that. And so he uses some sort of machine to take on his powers and goes back to the Baxter building, making believe that he's the Thing. So meanwhile, now he no longer has his powers. I believe he looks normal and all that, but he knows that he's got to, did he look normal? I can't remember now. Does he look normal at that point?
I'm not sure. I haven't read that in a very long time.
God, I should have looked at that. But anyway, he decides he has to go warn the Fantastic Four, who think that he's the imposter. And that's when, and Reed is developing the Negative Zone at that particular time, and traveling to into the antimatter universe. He has the Thing hold a tether, so he's not lost, but the tether breaks. The Thing imposter changes his opinion of Reed Richards, realizes he's really a good guy. He realizes how selfless Reed is. So meanwhile, Ben decides, okay, I can't get them to understand this, but now I can go to Alicia and propose to her. Right? Because I think he looked normal at the time. But because that guy realized that Reed was not as bad as he was, he reverses the process. And when Ben shows up at Alicia's door, he's back to being the Thing. So it's almost like you've got, the great psychologist Izzy of IzzyVerse looking at this thing. You see the fact that there's this guy who has struggled, but he has a greater. See, I almost looked at this almost kind of as a religious thing. He has this burden to bear, right? But he has a greater purpose in life, and because he has this greater purpose in life that was dictated for him, things will work out okay. Even though things look bad, it'll work out okay for you because this is who you were supposed to be. And I think that's really the end result of it, was this is who I was supposed to be, and I'll be that, I'll accept it, and my life will be a good life as it is. That's kind of the way I saw it anyway.
Yeah, very biblical in that nature. And it has a lot to do with Jack Kirby in general. This was more of a Jack Kirby story. So it was almost as if Jack Kirby was telling you a little autobiography about his character, because a lot of people don't know, when the Thing was created, he was created to be kind of like the essence of who Jack Kirby is. And Jack Kirby was very, he was a tough dude. He was, from the tough streets of New York. And he was always dealing with situations with his life. He would be if they wanted to fight, he'll be the first one ready to pull a punch in at somebody. He was very protective of his friends and things like that. But deep down inside, he was a rock hard guy. And that's kind of the idea of the Thing, that the Thing is your rock hard best friend who is dealing with that situation of, why can't I find love? Why can't I feel normal? And I think Jack dealt a lot with that, where Reed was always beating himself over, the Thing, over Ben, and how he was never able to really cure him, as he was say, of this condition that he now has. Because let's be honest, what can he do now that he's a rock hard character? Apparently in the movie he could grow a beard now, but that's a different story for a different time.
Well, and I just remembered one thing, because this whole thing, the imposter, Reed, the tether breaks, the imposter. So he sees Reed as being now selfless, whatever, and stuff like that. And so in order to save Reed, he jumps into the negative zone and using his strength, pushes Reed out and dies. And so when Ben shows up, now back to himself, they're mourning him as their friend, their best friend, part of their family who has died, because they think that the real Ben has passed away. And I think that had a real effect on him. He knew that people loved him, even though he looked at himself as being kind of this monster or whatever, that he's really a man and people see him that way. I think that was really kind of the end result, which perhaps made him realize that that's his purpose, and people love him for for who he is, not for what he looks like.
Yeah, and it's a great story. And again, as I mentioned earlier, they were hitting strides at this moment, so they were on fire. Look at that cover, man!
Great cover.
Oh, good. That is one of the best Kirby covers ever, especially what's going on with Reed in the background.
Oh yeah,
you got Reed. He's just glowing in the background. Negazone Sue is like, but Ben, and
save him. Now, is that I always Ben
what I always find interesting is, where's Johnny in all this? You know what I mean?
He's in college, man.
That's right. So that was like, they wrote him off. They wrote Johnny off.
Right.
All right. Our next book that we're gonna go to is the very next issue, which is by far one of the most important comic books in all of comic book history. This Fantastic Four 52. This came out in 1966. High sale of this book is at $83,650 at a 9.8. That was in February of 2016. Last sale of this book was $349 at a 4.0. And the raws are going for about $390 at a very good, $718 at a 6.5. There's currently 8,882 copies in the census. This features the first appearance of the Black Panther. Reason why I say this is such a significant book is that we finally have a Black character in the Marvel Universe. And what I love that Kirby and Stan did with this character was that they didn't just make him a black character; they made him a king in T'Challa. So I love the fact that they were progressive in their thought process when it came to this character and the importance. They knew this character had to be important, so they couldn't just make this guy some jive turkey from the streets of Harlem, if you know what I mean. And I think that's what's so important about this book with Black Panther. I think it's ridiculously low for its price.
Right. So
ooh, you got a graded copy.
Right. This is the only one I got graded because I was looking at my copies, and now and then I get one of my copies graded. You know, I sent it in, I cleaned it, I pressed it, and I sent it in, and I was hoping for a 4, but I got a 4.5.
Oh,
I was happy with that number. All right.
What you get it back? How dare you give me a 4.5 when I wanted a 4?
Well, I was estimating it. I mean, it's pretty. The corners are pretty sharp. I mean, there is some loss here, some etching and things like that, you know, and it's black, so it's difficult to get away with the black that's there. But the thing about this is, I think that's the key. Is that, I mean, remember reading some interviews by Stan that Stan gave about this, and he felt I needed to have a black character come in, and I was wondering what it would be. So I said, why don't I make him the king of this nation in Africa? That's one of the most advanced nations in the world, you know. He says, so that's what I did. And as the story goes, he gifted the Fantastic Four a flying machine to come and visit them. But the other thing that I remember about this was that they went to Metro College to just check on Johnny to see how he was doing, and he introduced him to White Wingfoot. And so when they were going to go to see Wakanda, Johnny asked if White can go with them. So now you've got, and White was a Native American. So now you've got not only the African, but you have a Native American, and they're all going to Wakanda. And of course, when they get to Wakanda, that typically this happens all the time. They get attacked.
Yeah, some kind of conflict, right?
Yeah, and all of that. And then at the end, and T'Challa's there, and at the end, he takes off his mask and says, I was just fooling, guys. I just wanted to see, I was testing your fabled powers or something like that. I heard so much about you, world's greatest comic magazine. Yeah, let me see, you know? And so it was basically just a test. And, but he did have, I can't remember what it was now, but there was a big issue, a thing that he was confronting that he wanted their help on. And that's why he tested them. And that's in the following issues, I think, and the storyline continues.
Yeah. I think Black Panther is such an important character because of that factor. And during this time, we're talking about 1966. This is at the height of the civil rights movements that were going on. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, all this stuff that's happening, the Vietnam War. So it was very socially, there was a big political social justice movement going on during that time. And really to introduce a character that is black, that is a king, I'm sure it pissed off a lot of people.
Well, but there was a lot going on there. You're right. And I lived through some of that. And I experienced some of that in some of the northern cities that I was in. It was really horrible. But what was going down in the South was very difficult for a lot of people to understand up north. And so I think he was very brave, in some ways of looking at this, to develop this character and make him into a character he was. But I think he was sending a message.
Yeah.
Well,
it wouldn't be the last time Stan Lee does that, though, because there's always, but Stan Lee was always known for doing, like, going past what was asked of him, because he wanted to reflect real life society and what real life was going through in his comic books in some way. So we're going to move forward. We're going to go to another annual. We talked a little bit about the negative zone. So let's talk a little bit more about that negative zone in Fantastic Four Annual number 6. This book came out in 1968. High sale of this book is $25,389 at a 9.8. That was back in June of 2009. The last sale of this book was $660 at 9.2. Raws go for $43 at a very good. Graded copies goes for $263 at an 8.0. The average count, well, the CGC count is 2,579 copies. This is the first appearance of Annihilus, and this is the first appearance of the child of Sue and Reed, Franklin Richards. Double key, double importance. So let's first talk a little bit about Annihilus, because I think Franklin's going to be an even more important character that we're going to talk about a little later. But let's talk a little bit more about Annihilus, and talk to me about the villain Annihilus.
Well, I have to confess that I have to confess I didn't read this issue. I don't have this issue. And so I'm not really sure what I can say about him, because he's not a character that I followed. At this point in time, I really stopped collecting comic books. And so I'm more interested to hear what you have to say about him. I can talk a little bit about Franklin Richards, because I did, when I came back, he was a significant character in some respects.
Yeah. So Annihilus is a character that was created in he's a negative zone character. So he does have some cosmic side to him, and he does become a big figure later on in the 2000s when it comes to the Annihilation storyline. But he's, how do I put this? He's one of those characters that's kind of like a bug, if that makes sense.
He looks like one.
He's the ruler of the negative zone. That's the first thing. So he controls the negative zone. And like I said, there's not a lot. He's kind of one-dimensional in that way. But what's interesting is because of the fact that he's like, he needs to feed in some way. So very Galactus-like in that way. But he's also one of these guys that's just, he's a ruler. He wants to control everything. He wants to take care of it. He wants Sue. He wants to do all this stuff. He has his minions. So I don't know if his characterization is as well thought out as some of the other villains go. I think for my sake, he's been one-dimensional for a very long time. And it was really just a story to get into the negative zone, to see what this world looks like. And he just happens to be the ruler of the negative zone. That's kind of the way it goes.
That's it.
However, when it comes to Franklin, though, where in this book, Franklin Richards, there's not much to be said about Franklin Richards in this book, but it is much to be said about who Franklin Richards is in comics, in the Marvel Universe. As you said, we could definitely talk more about Franklin Richards, because I think that's why people really are trying to grab this book, more so for Franklin rather than Annihilus, even though I do believe we will see Annihilus someday. Franklin Richards is considered to be one of the most powerful characters in all of the Marvel Universe. Now, for a very long time, they called Franklin Richards the most powerful mutant. That he was an Omega level mutant. They since retconned that. Yeah. And now he just happens to be one of the most powerful beings in the universe. And he has the ability to create universes. So very godlike character in Franklin Richards. It just so happens to be the son of Franklin. It just so happens to be the son of Reed and Sue. What a coincidence. What can you tell me a little bit about Franklin?
Well, I know you're going to talk a little bit about the Future Foundation and some of the other books that he was involved with in that. What I recall, and again, I didn't read too many of the books back then. It was like picking up one here or there, was that he was very smart and bright as a youth, but developing kind of these powers, I don't remember that like early on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it wasn't until like I think Burn or something like that.
Yeah, they put that into him a little bit later, which always kind of intrigued me, because I always, in my mind, and you know, I guess maybe I've been proven wrong, but to me it just seemed extreme, you know, because when he gets to the point where he can do things, bring back stuff, do all that, I mean, you look and you're saying, okay, you're right, godlike. So what kind of storylines are you going to have? They talk about it's hard to write Superman because he's so powerful. Well, how do you write about Franklin Richards, for Pete's sakes? What are you going to, you know, why is he a character that's there? As a kid who may be developing, doesn't know, that's one thing, but as he gets older or develops his powers, it just seems like there's nothing that he can't do.
Yeah. And I think now he's a teenager.
Right.
From what I know in the comic books, they have him, they aged him a little bit, even though he takes a long time to age because he was born in 1968 and he's still a teenager.
Yeah.
Wish I had that
Right.
that problem. But he's just one of those characters that I think when he was created, that probably wasn't the initial thought of Franklin Richards.
I know
until much until much later, where they found some kind of purpose to make him such an important figure in comics, especially when it came to the Heroes Reborn storyline and things like that. And then ultimately with the Secret Wars storyline, which we'll talk a little bit towards later too. Right. I think he's just one of those characters that he's there to fix something. If they need to fix something, let's just get Franklin in here to take care of it. You know what I mean? Yeah. He's an easy way out for writers, I would say. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know that I like his character. I mean, I don't know. You're right. Easy way out type of thing. I just don't. I don't like that type of stuff. It's kind of like that FF50 with the Silver Surfer. I mean, at the end where now I got the gun that can kill you. I mean, so like
the nullifier. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, I got this thing. It can stop you cold turkey.
Right. So to me, you're right. It's like an easy way out. I don't disagree with that. And I just wonder when they do something like that, and it could play a part in a book or in a series. And I understand that, but make it temporary or something. I mean, do something so that it's not quite that God level power. I don't know. That's just my view on it.
Well, he's going to be a major issue in the Fantastic Four movie because now the story has been put out there that Galactus wants Franklin. That's what the story is. So there's some bargaining chip to go along when, of course, the Fantastic Four would be like, "No, destroy our planet. We want our kid."
Yeah,
that's pretty much what's going to happen. That's like, you know what? You could we'll find another planet to live in. So have at it. You know what I mean?
I can see why he would want him. I mean, if he can create whole galaxies, Galactus will never go hungry. I mean,
he's like an open buffet for Galactus, isn't he?
That's right.
He's like, oh, what do you want? I would like T-bone steak, please. It's like, here you go, T-bone steak planet.
You got it.
And that's what Franklin's purpose is. So we'll see how that goes and how that transpires when the movie comes out. So we're going to fast forward a little bit to 1970. So we're going to just go 2 years later, and we're going to go into Fantastic Four 102. This book came out in 1970 for Marvel Comics. The high sale of this book is at $965 at 9.8. That was all the way back in 2020 of November. Last sale, this book was $10 at a good, $13 at a fine is the average, $204 is 9.4 is the average graded. There's 351 copies in the census, and this issue marks the end of Jack Kirby and Stan Lee's groundbreaking run on this series, closing the chapter that laid the foundation for Marvel's modern universe. At the same time, there's more information when it comes to this book because it's not exactly, it shouldn't have been the final issue. So, Joe, talk to me a little bit of issue 103 should have been the final issue, but it was this one.
Yeah. So they did write one more story, and you're gonna have to fill in some of the blanks. I'm trying to remember now, but that story was never published, and I can't remember the reason why.
It was as they say it was lost or something like that.
Yeah. I don't believe that. I think there was.
I don't believe that either. It was purposely lost. It was misplaced
because suddenly it was found, and I have that issue somewhere.
And I think it was republished. It was published.
Yeah, as the last, did they call it the last Fantastic Four story or something like that?
Yeah,
and it wasn't a bad story as I remember it. It was a Stan Lee, Jack Kirby story. It was okay, But at this point in time, just the partnership had to end. It was 1970. Kirby, I guess still felt unappreciated and all that, and he was ready to make the leap over to DC.
Yeah.
And I think that's why they didn't publish it.
Well, yeah, at that point he was moving to DC. He ended up contracting with DC to do his take on characters, which I think for the most part it was his run on DC, though, he gave us so many good stuff that came out of it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's as successful as they thought it was going to be. Today we could look at it and say, oh, this is awesome stuff, and you could agree to it, like with Mr. Miracle, with the New Gods, Dark Side, those creations. But at the same time, it wasn't at that time, and you lived it, so you could tell me more.
Yeah, and I have a lot of those comics, and I know exactly what happened because I collected comics into the 1970s, and I started collecting the Kirby stuff. Mm-hmm. And Kirby, they asked Kirby to develop a horror type book. Mm-hmm. All right. And that's when he came up with the Demon. Right. And so his New Gods series were not selling well, but the Demon was selling like crazy. Yeah. So they told him, he originally developed the Demon, and I forget the name of the guy, but he had an assistant that was helping him out. Yeah. And he originally wanted this assistant to take over the Demon. And he actually wanted Steve Ditko to start taking over at least some of the New Gods. Yeah. You know, I think it was the New Gods. But in any event, they told him, no, you're going to stop all the New Gods stuff because the Demon is serving so well. We want you to continue with the Demon, and you got to spend your time on the Demon, you know. And that was the start of where, because he never was able to finish his storylines, obviously. Most of them ended with number 11, if I remember correctly. And so that's when he started to sour on them as well, you know, with respect to that, because he couldn't. So he did the Demon, I think around the first 17, 18 issues, something like that, you know, before he left. And then someone else took it over for the last 10 issues or so of that run with respect to that.
Yeah. It is interesting looking back at the story, and you know, there was a fallout between him and Stan. Obviously, Stan got more credit than he probably deserved to, but that also goes to the showmanship of who Stan Lee was, as opposed to, you know, these artists that were very introverted in nature with Ditko and Kirby. Stan went out. He was front and center. He was going out to the colleges. He was talking to people. He became a character all to his own.
Absolutely.
And he's, you know, well regarded. When you think of comics, to be honest, when you think of comics, besides the characters, you think of Stan Lee. And to many people, some people probably even watching this video, they believe Stan Lee is an artist. Stan Lee is an artiste. He's not an artist. He's a writer. He's a script writer, more importantly, and he wanted to be a novelist, and therefore that's why he never really used his real name. His real name is Stanley Lieber, but he decided to take his name of Stanley, cut it into half, turn into Stan Lee, even though his brother was Larry Lieber. So I never got that part. But
the interesting thing about it is, you know, after Jack passed away. Because I've read a lot of stuff. If I see interviews and whatever by Stan, whether it's video or whether it's written, he eventually came around to say that Jack was kind of the co-creator of a lot of these things. The Marvel method really made it that way in some respects. Yeah. But he insisted, and it's probably true, that at least the ideas that he came up with, he says, I want a story about this, and there's this guy, and this is the villain, and whatever else, you know, this is what I want. And then the Jack Kirby's, you know, and the Steve Ditkos would draw the whole thing. And as you mentioned, he would then put in the dialogue. So he kept on saying, yeah, it was my idea for this character, but maybe he didn't flesh it out. And it was the artist that really fleshed it out through the graphics that were put together.
Yeah. And they weren't given writing credits for that.
Correct.
Right. So they were giving credits as the artist, not necessarily the creative team.
Correct.
So where today we'll be given more credit, you know, like co-plotter or something like that.
Correct. Yes.
Where then it was like, this is the writer, this is the artist, and that's that. But deep down inside, it was a collaborative effort more so than any other style that came before it. It was just an easy way for Stan to do multiple jobs in a company that he was running really by himself, because these guys were doing the artwork, but he was the businessman that came with it. So, you know, and he say what you want to say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Say what you want to say about, Stan Lee, but he had a lot of hats.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And many times he had to wear those hats at the same time. So,
and one significant thing was that in those days, until Marvel did this, they'd never had kind of the credits on that first page, the first splash page. I mean, DC never did that. I don't remember seeing that in Dell or any of the other books that were there.
Yeah.
So they were the first ones to give this accreditation, and in some ways that was the problem, because they just had writer, artist, letterer, inker, period.
Yeah, exactly. So this is an important book because it's the end of an era, and now we're going to go into some new creative teams. But before we do that, we're going to go back to one of our famous battles. We had to see round 2 of the Hulk versus the Thing. This book came out in 1971. Fantastic Four 112. High sale of this book is $6,300 at a 9.8. That was in 2017. Last sale of this book was $195 at 7.0. Ross goes for $78. Very good. While 8.5 is the average, going for $479. It's 2,720 copies in the census. John Buscema gives us an iconic Hulk versus Thing cover. So,
with another black background.
Enough said. Here you go. We got another battle here. Dare I say, I like John Buscema's take even more so than Jack Kirby's.
It's really good.
Yeah,
it's really good. Yeah. I mean, just the cover here. I don't remember what happens in this fight, but I do know it's kind of the reverse, as I remember, because I think I had this book at one time, because I don't have it now. Okay, but I remember this. So I remember reading the story, kind of. Whereas in the first one, the Hulk is rampaging through New York City. Here, the Thing is rampaging through New York City. He's going through Central Park and all that, and he gets stopped by the Hulk. I don't remember why or how, but the Hulk, I mean, there's no power in New York, and the Hulk decides, maybe he sees the Thing rampage and goes, hey, I'm going to stop this. I do remember this. Agatha Harkness was part of this. I think there was magic going on. I don't remember the specifics of it, but I do remember that was the storyline. And I think at the end, everybody believes that the Thing is dead.
Again?
Am I right on that?
I don't know. I never read it. So,
oh gosh,
this is one of those iconic covers that most people don't justify as a key. It's just a cover for most people. So what's the interiors don't really talk about. So that's the story behind this.
I'm pretty sure, but I'm not positive. Don't hold me to it, guys. I've been in a long time.
Been a while, guys.
But this is no big sell here. I mean, the Hulk versus the Thing, and to the finish, basically. I mean, that was kind of the idea behind it.
Well, the cover says it, right? Enough said. You don't have to open the book to find out how good it is. Just look at this cover.
Exactly.
All right. Now we're gonna go even further out. We're gonna go 8 years later to 1979. This is Fantastic Four 209. The high sale of this book is $360 at 9.8. That was this year, February of 2025. Last sale of this book was $9 at a no grade. Raw goes for about $16 at a fine. $128 at 9.6. 372 copies in the census. This is the first appearance of Herbie the Robot. But some people might think that this is also more important because it's the first John Byrne on Fantastic Four. I don't know, man. Herbie's pretty popular, man. So we're at this time here.
Well, he's going to be in the movies. So
we got some Herbie, but do you know the story of Herbie?
I don't really know the story, although I know that Herbie stands for something.
Yes, it definitely
that
stands for
something. Was H period something or other, but I don't know anything about Herbie.
Herbie's an acronym, of course. So if you give me a second here, I could get you what Herbie stands for. It's definitely the cartoons. It's an acronym for humanoid experimental robot B-type integrated electronics.
Sounds like almost like a Stan Lee creation.
It's like, let's just figure out a way to call this guy Herbie.
Right.
Herbie is a very interesting character. And the importance around Herbie has more to do with cartoons than it does with the actual comic book. So back in 1979, Herbie was introduced into the comic books, but he was in the cartoons prior.
Right.
So there was a Fantastic Four cartoons in which they decided not to put the Human Torch. Now there was a rumor behind it, which the rumor was since debunked. But the rumor had it that the Human Torch shouldn't have been on TV because it's going to give the children watching the opportunity to set themselves on fire because they want to flame on.
Okay.
So that was the myth. It's a myth. That's what people thought it was. The reality of it was it had something to do with rights. The Human Torch was supposed to have been, and it actually never happened either. He was supposed to be part of something else, and largely it happened again with Spider-Man. So if you, I don't know how old were you at the time, but if you recall Spider-Man and his amazing friends, Spider-Man's friends were Iceman and Firestar, but in reality, it should have been Human Torch. So he's always been never there, but he was originally the intention.
I see.
So with him, it was more of the option of a possible movie that they wanted to do with the Human Torch as a character. I don't know what was going on in the 70s. That was just one of those weird things like, hey, we want to use Human Torch for something else. So he was not allowed to be part of the cartoons because they thought they needed to use it from somewhere else. Where Herbie was created for the cartoons and then eventually made his way into the comics by way of John Byrne, including him into the story. And now we're going to have Herbie in the movie for the first time. So that's why this book is one of those trending books, but it's still relatively inexpensive. It's a pretty cheap book to buy. Let's focus more our attention on John Byrne right now, because John Byrne did something with the Fantastic Four that was struggling after Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and that was sales. The Fantastic Four dipped in sales, and John Byrne was given the Fantastic Four kind of to revitalize it. Right. I don't think he fully did it. He didn't fully accomplish that goal. However, his run is now considered one of the great runs in the Fantastic Four for good reasons. So what can you tell me about your understanding of the Fantastic Four with John Byrne?
Not much, because at this time, 1979, I had met the woman who was going to be my wife, and I was in law school. And so I was like,
you found girls?
Not much time on my hands between trying to get this girl to fall in love with me and studying and, working. I was also working at the same time. So I didn't have much, really in terms of comic books during the late 70s, early 80s into the 90s. Very little experience with them. So what I can say is, looking at this cover, I don't have this one. I do have a few that I've picked up since. I don't have this one, but it's a really, really great cover. There's a lot to look at. There's
a lot going on in this cover. Yeah, it's definitely.
But John Byrne is a great, he's a great artist, and he brings his own sensibilities to things. And just from looking at this, I think the thing looks really good. The one thing that I can tell you is that although he tries to approximate a little bit about the history of the way these characters look, the one thing we didn't mention about Jack Kirby is that most people looked alike. Their facial, all the women kind of look the same. All the men kind of look the same, their facial stuff.
Yeah.
They all could have been like, half brothers or half sisters from a different father or mother. And Byrne wasn't like that. He made people look, a bit different. So they didn't have the same appearance that everybody else did. So that I could say.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things that with Sue Storm specifically that a lot of the artists did was she was one of those characters that changed with the times.
Yes.
Not so much her costume, her hair. So one of the things that they always did, and the Wasp was another character that was like that, but it wasn't her hair, it was her costumes. is that they will constantly change her hairstyle. And again, I think there's the psychology to that, right? I want to get noticed, so I'm going to change my hair so you can notice me, and yet still don't notice me. Which John Byrne definitely took advantage of that, and exploited that dynamic of Sue Storm, which we're going to get to momentarily. But when it comes to the John Byrne run, one of the things that he did do, and it had something to do with one of the stories that were going outside of the Fantastic Four, and that was Secret Wars, the first edition of the Secret Wars. So the Marvel Superhero Secret Wars, in which, excuse me, in which Ben Grimm left the group. So there was a void in the group, and it was John Byrne that brought about the She-Hulk into the team. So this book is Fantastic Four 265, came out in 1984. High sale of this book was $175, 9.8. That was in 2023. Last sale of this book, $5 near mint, and the Raws are going for about $4 at a fine. $151 is 9.8 average, and it's 297 copies in the census. She-Hulk joins the Fantastic Four as a result of the Secret Wars storyline that happened outside of Fantastic Four. So we lose the Thing. We get a She-Hulk into the team. Right. And you looking from the outside looking in, what is your thoughts on She-Hulk being part of the Fantastic Four? Of course, we're going to always say there's nothing like the original. But how do you feel about She-Hulk being part of the team?
Well, I think what you lose is the family interaction, the interaction between the Human Torch, for example, and Ben, and even to some extent Reed Richards and Ben. Those interactions, at least in my history with the FF, was very important, and I think that's one thing that you would miss from the standpoint of a teammate or whatever. My assumption would be if it's reality, it would take her a while to kind of get into the scheme of things. And I don't know whether or not she respected Reed in the same way that Ben would have respected Reed. So I think it's different. I mean, the relationship has to be different. The interactions have to be different. And not saying that to be bad. I don't know, because I didn't read these series, but I think it would definitely be a different, a different chemistry there than you had with Ben.
I agree entirely on that, because you do lose that family side of things with Ben's side of the family. She-Hulk, I can't, for the life of me, I can't tell you if it was successful or not. I do remember her being part of the team, and it gave Sue someone to talk to, I guess, to have some girl talk with,
I guess.
But I think it was because how much John likes She-Hulk. And I know, he ended up doing stories with She-Hulk. She ended up breaking the fourth wall and things. She became more of a comedic style character. Obviously a derivative character from the Hulk. It was their way of trying to keep the rights of the name She-Hulk, so the TV wouldn't do it. But and it was a Stan Lee, She-Hulk is a Stan Lee creation. And I don't know exactly how important she is to Fantastic Four lore, but she wasn't the only, person to be part of the Fantastic Four. You also have Crystal, that was a member of the Fantastic Four, and then we'll talk about some other characters that were brought into the Fantastic Four very temporarily. We'll get to in a minute, but I think it was more of an opportunity for John to write She-Hulk. That's my personal thought on it.
Could be. Yeah, it could be. I didn't know his background with her, but could be for sure. Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about giving Sue the opportunity to talk to somebody. Well, because no one pays attention to Sue. And in issue 280 of Fantastic Four, that came out in 1984 with a high sale of $200 at 9.8 and a last sale of $4 at a very good, with a Raw going for $5 and for 9.8 averaging at $74, 200 copies in the census. The Invisible Woman becomes Malice. And Malice is an evil alter ego of Sue Storm, the Invisible Woman. I don't know if she was the Invisible Woman just yet, but I know very soon she would become the Invisible Woman. I know John Byrne adamantly made the change to call her Invisible Woman. But this is a great story, and we get to the a really cool cover in 281 with the character of Malice. Malice is everything that Sue wants to express but can't. And she becomes this evil version of herself. But what John Byrne did with this character wasn't so much he turned her evil, he just made her express what she was feeling inside. And she becomes this evil, the psycho, I believe it's the Psycho Master, is the name of the villain that did it. And this, this is again a character that as of today has become famous through the Marvel Rivals video game that's out now. That people like their characterization, but she became such a big deal. And I think we are going to eventually see her become Malice in the movie someday, if it's successful. So I think there's a place for that.
Well, I think you got to wait and see how Sue is represented in the movie, because as you've mentioned a number of times, nobody paid attention to her in these books. She was, in some ways, she was like the fragile woman there, even when she had the power, she goes, oh, well, okay, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, and
who am I? Oh, no.
She needed to be saved a lot, kind of, or even though she saved the FF quite a few times herself, but she had to almost like at the end of it, if she put up a force field, she would like collapse, I mean, it always seemed like she was the fragile one out of the group. Yeah. And so I agree with you because I know a little bit about this, not a lot, because again, I wasn't reading it this time, but Psycho Man, I think was, or whatever it was, he took advantage of that and basically was able psychologically to have her come out and use the stuff that she would have wanted to use, or to say, and almost kind of to attack the Fantastic Four because you didn't pay attention to me. And I wanted to do this and to show you how powerful I was, but I never had like the oomph or the guts or whatever to do it. But now I do,
Yeah, he took advantage of this timid character, and she kind of she just got out of her shell. So where Malice, obviously we call this the evil alternate version, alter ego of her. She really wasn't. It was an extension of who she really was, how she really was feeling, expressed outwardly and in a violent manner, right? Even to the point of how she dressed and things like that, which was very interesting. The amount of the costume changes they gave Sue afterwards, you know what I mean? It was like, oh, what's going on here? You know what I mean? With her costumes, and that was the 80s and 90s for you. But she was ignored, and now she will not be ignored. And she went from being Invisible Girl to, damn it, I'm Invisible Woman. I'm a married woman with children. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm a freaking woman. I ain't no girl.
Right.
And I think that's what John was really doing. I think that was really, that was a good move in John parts to do that with her character. It gives him an opportunity to do some good storytelling that at that time, as you could tell by the price here, at the time, people really weren't jumping in on, because everybody wanted X-Men, everybody wanted Teen Titans, everybody wanted Spider-Man. But Fantastic Four had some really good stories going on during this time. It's just unfortunate that at that time, not a lot of people were reading Fantastic Four, even though it said the world's greatest comic magazine. No one really believed it at that time.
Right. Agreed. Agreed. That was just a leftover. But I agree with you. I think this was a way of showing kind of a maturity of Sue Storm, that enabled the name change.
Yeah. And with that being said, we're going to jump some more a few years later, because as I said before, Fantastic Four was one of those books that was struggling to make sales. It made enough sales to not get canceled. And I think there was a level of respect, being that it is Stan's and Jack's first book. So I think there was a little respect going on in the 90s. But they needed to put a string of energy. They wanted to get people to buy this book. And the way they did it was let's just make a new Fantastic Four. And they did. And that came in about Fantastic Four 348 in 1991 with Marvel Comics. There's a high sale of $205 and 9.8, and that was in December of 2022. Last sale was $1 at a no grade.
Look at it, for Pete's sake.
and the raws were $9 at a fine. Graded copies averages out about $105. They say 141 copies. I got 2 of those copies, by the way.
You do? I have none.
I love that. I love this book. It's the first cover appearance of the new Fantastic Four. They made their first appearance in the previous issue in 347, which I actually have right there. And I have the issue that follows right next to it. The new Fantastic Four. So I'm going to take it, Joe. You're not as familiar with this, but I can tell you this is all me here. The new Fantastic Four, and if you look at the top, it's kind of hard to read it. Instead of saying world's most greatest comic book, it actually says the world's most commercialized comic magazine. So at this time, Walter Simonson was writing the book, and they decided to get a guest artist. So this is actually filler books. These 3 issues are filler issues. They decided to get the artist Arthur Adams to do the art, which it is gorgeous. That's why I love this book, because of Art Adams more. Yeah. And it makes so much sense. If a book is struggling to make sales, how do you make sales? Let's put Spider-Man, Wolverine, Hulk, and Ghost Rider, the 4 most popular characters in comics today in the Marvel Universe, and we turn them into a team. And that's exactly what this was. Mm-hmm. This was an attempt to make sales. That's why when you look at the prices of this book, they're so low, because there's a high volume of books in this book. There's a high values, but you get me a phenomenal writer in Walt Simonson. You get me one of the best artists out there to do the interiors and the covers, and you got a recipe for success. Not only that, it's kind of a very comedic book. So they're pulling jabs. So the story goes is that the Fantastic Four disappeared, if I recall. Right. They disappeared, and we need to find them. So they get these 4 guys. And they do that. And the last issue, there's even a cameo of the Punisher, which is one of the best cameos, because that is the epitome of what a cameo looks like. Okay. He's just flying in the air, and that's it. He's not even involved in the story. Just flying. So, moving on. But there was an opportunity to make sales. That's all it was. Yeah. And they made sales because people bought it. I saw it. I remember going to the newsstand, seeing this book, and I immediately grabbed it, not knowing anything of the inside. I just saw this cover and I said, "Oh, I need this."
I can kind of understand that. You've got all those characters there, and you're wondering, Ghost Rider, it's right there, and and Spider-Man, Hulk, whatever. I mean, so you're saying, at the very least, if you're a Fantastic Four person, you've been following it along, you say, "What the hell is going on here?"
Yeah, it's just
prior issue, but
it's a fantastic, and it says the new Fantastic Four. It didn't last long. It was only 3 issues, because we got the original Fantastic Four back within issue 350. So it was just a means to get to 350.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So we're gonna move away from Fantastic Four comics now, but we're gonna keep the Fantastic Four theme here. We're gonna go into a book that I know you're not that familiar with, but I think it's a nice hidden gem that's out there, and that is Fantastic Four Unstable Molecules #1. This book came out in 2003 from Marvel Comics. There is nothing in the census, so the high sale of this book is $5. That's pretty much where it is. It's a dollar bin book. It's a series, Eisner winning limited series, which is a fictional.
Amazing. Never heard of it before. Never heard of it.
It's I actually have it. I read it years ago. And it's a fictional real world FF origin story, which I think it's one of those stories that I think everybody should take an opportunity to take a look at. And it's just taking the concept of the Fantastic Four and putting them in a real world environment. That's really the story behind it. The artwork is reminiscent of Kirby in a way, and as well as that 60s energy that it was drawing from.
Now, so when you say real world environment, are you saying whatever was actually happening back in the early 2000s in the world and putting them
No,
into it?
this we're talking about in the 60s.
Oh, so it's back to the 60s. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's back to the 60s. It's back to what it really is all about. But it's one of those books that, again, it is highly praised by the critics, to the point that it did win an Eisner Award for being the best limited series. But it's one that I think people,
Yeah.
need to go back and say, hey, what's this all about? Because I think it does have merit to be read.
Well, definitely one I'm going to look for, especially since it's cheap.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it is something to talk a little bit about. And again, it goes back to that whole thing. And I'll just go ahead and read a little bit here. Like, in the Marvel Universe, unstable molecules are a fictional material invented by Reed Richards. These molecules are characterized by their unique ability to mimic the properties of other materials or even living beings, making them incredibly versatile. Specifically, they are used in the creation of the Fantastic Four costumes, allowing them to stretch, becoming invisible, or withstanding extreme temperatures without damage. Again, it goes back to this, like, what is this real world advice? This is like, what if Oppenheimer was Reed Richards?
I see. Yeah.
Take that approach to it.
Yeah.
And I think there's something unique in that. And
Mhm.
again, it's a $1 bin book. You could get this anywhere for anywhere. You're not going to don't spend money on this book. But if you want to read a pretty cool story, there you have it.
Got it.
All right.
I'm writing it down.
Yeah. Our next book here is a reintroduction of the Fantastic Four, specifically the Ultimate Fantastic Four, the original Ultimate Fantastic Four #1 that came out in 2004 from Marvel Comics. This has a high sale of $170 at a 9.9. That was in 2021. Last sale of this book is $7, no grade. Rawls goes for $4 at a very fine, $67 at $67 at a 9.6. There's currently 1,177 copies in the census. This is the first appearance and origin of the Ultimate Fantastic Four, and it includes Ultimate Reed Richards, who later becomes the Maker. This is a Fantastic Four for a new generation, and it changes the mythos a bit, but for the most part keeps it about the same. But it goes off after a while. It goes off to be its own thing. And this is where we get Marvel Zombies from. And more importantly, this is where Reed Richards goes AWOL and he loses it and becomes the Maker, who's now a villain in the Ultimate Universe. I think the Maker is going to be a big character someday. And this may be a good opportunity to get this book. I will get the book that's
From what
more
I know,
about
I
the
would
Maker.
say yes. Yeah, I'm just saying,
I agree.
think if the Fantastic Four, if the movie takes off and they have subsequent ones, I know it'll be part of the MCU, but I'm hoping that they have some individual kind of adventures as well, because I think moving into this direction, I know a little bit about the Maker, having read a little bit about this. I think I actually bought this magazine because I saw it was a #1 or whatever. I think it's important that they give the Fantastic Four the room to breathe. And there's so many good stories that could come out of it, not just from the Silver Age, but even some of these things you've spoken about, that I think it would be really a crime if they don't let that happen.
Yeah. And I think with the character of the Maker, there's so much open potential for him, even within the MCU, because I could see them do this thing where they get the character, Miles Teller, the actor Miles Teller, who played Reed Richards in the terrible Fantastic Four movie that came in between these two, the last Fantastic Four movie. You turn him into the Maker, I think we got something. You know what I mean? I don't know if they're going to cross those paths with Multiverse after Secret Wars, but man, that will be something cool to do. You know what I mean? Just get this character. Everybody hated that movie. Why not do something with it?
And I'm hoping, I'm not a big Multiverse fan because I think it's gotten overused. But if you can use it to bring a particular character to bear, and just to make the connection, that's fine. I'm okay with that.
And I think that's the idea that I would do if I was part of the writing staff at the MCU. Let's talk about something that's fresh. You mentioned it a few times before, and at this time, really in the 2000s and 10s and things like that, the Fantastic Four was at an all-time low. And partly because they were at a different studios, they were part of the Fox studio, and Marvel didn't care so much about them. Disney was obviously took over, and they were still stuck in Fox alongside the X-Men. So they're trying to do something different with the Fantastic Four in the comics. And this was what they came up with. They came up with FF. FF is not short for Fantastic Four. It's short for Future Foundation. FF #1, it came out in 2011 for Marvel Comics. This has a high of $125,9.8, and that was in 2023. Last sale of this book was $2,000. No grade. $3 is the raw average. $113 is the 9.8 average. Book has 147 copies in the census. This is the first team appearance of the Future Foundation. It's also the debut of Spider-Man as being part of the Future Foundation in costume. Future Foundation is very different from the Fantastic Four because, one, they're not really four. It's multiple, but it also includes the children of Reed and Sue. So Franklin's part of the Future Foundation. You said you know a little bit about Future Foundation. So talk to me a little bit about it.
Because I actually bought these books. Okay. And honestly, I have to tell you, I don't remember too much about the stories. I bought it because I remember the What If book. What if Spider-Man was part of the Fantastic Four? Well, here it was. And he was part of the Fantastic Four. And what I remember, there was a lot of science involved with that. Dr. Nathaniel Richards joins the whole thing later on. Dr. Doom, I think, joins the FF at some point in time as well. And then you get the Council of Reeds with the Reed Alpha and all that. The kids were the part that was more interesting to me because there is where you finally see some of Franklin Richards' powers, as I remember. The storylines that were there. So that's basically all I kind of remember about it. And at some point in time, maybe I forget how long it went, but maybe around issue 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, something like that, I just stopped buying it. I lost interest in the storyline because it wasn't really Fantastic Four, as you mentioned. Yeah. And it just became kind of this big mishmash of things that were going on. There was an incursion between two Earths, and to me, these type of things started to kind of confuse me. It wasn't the type of stories I was looking for, I think.
Yeah, it was trying to, and this is Jonathan Hickman, right? So Jonathan Hickman is one of those writers that he is considered, he's almost like an auteur type of writer, highly regarded, very intricate in his method. So he's one of those writers that he writes for the long term. He doesn't write for the short term. So whatever story he's telling you, he probably has a purpose with it down the road rather than on the spot, right? So there's a lot of writing going on. There's a lot of putting pieces together, and that's how kind of what he did with the X-Men. Here, before the X-Men, 2011, the Future Foundation, again, it goes back to that concept of let's make something out of this, right? Because we can't do this. So let's do this. And I don't think it ever really caught on the way they would have liked it to. But it, like you said, it was more about Franklin's story with Future Foundation. Obviously, the inclusion of Spider-Man to get some sales in there. Even Spider-Man couldn't save the Future Foundation. But I think something came out of it. You know what I mean? And we're going to see Future Foundation in the movie somehow. So there is something to do with the Future Foundation in some way.
Do you think we're going to see Future Foundation in the movie?
Oh no, it's all in there. So they work in the Future Foundation. It's a thing. So it's not a thing. It is,
but not in the nature of the way the comic book.
No, not in the comic book. Not in the comic book format. So it's not a team. Future Foundation is an organization. It is a schooling system. It's something like that.
It's Richard's School for Youngsters or something like that.
Yeah, it's something along that lines, and that's how they're going to bring the Future Foundation, which makes sense the way it sounds. It's Future Foundation. That's how it should make sense. Kind of
the way the comic book ran, as I remember.
Yeah,
so there was a School for Gifted Youngsters or something like that he was, working on. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So we're drawing close to the end, but we still got 2 more to go for. Our next book here is a very important book to the Fantastic Four, and that is Secret Wars. Talking about Jonathan Hickman, he was gearing towards this. This is what I mean about long-term storytelling. Secret Wars #1. This book came out in 2015. The high sale of this book is $310 at 9.8. That was in June of 2022. Last sale of this book was $8 at a no grade. Ross goes for about $16 near mint. 9.8s are going for $56 on average. There's currently 1,066 copies in the census. This is the first cameo appearance of God Emperor Doom. We talked a little, you mentioned the incursions. So what is an incursion? An incursion is when 2 universes are about to mash up with each other, and the only thing you do is kind of like fight it off for who's going to win, or they both destroy each other. And this was Marvel's attempt of taking all their continuity and putting it all together, including the Ultimate Universe and things like that. So what's your knowledge of Secret Wars and incursions and all that stuff?
Well, I actually read this series, okay, but it was a while back, and I do remember, that Dr. Doom was involved with it, and what I recall about it was that he basically was destroying some of the other worlds because of these incursions where these different Earths.
He was getting ahead of it.
Yeah, he was staying ahead of it, and in order to maintain his world, where he became God Emperor Doom, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
He was destroying these other worlds. And in this one, because he actually developed the world itself, he was actually married to Sue, and Reed and Franklin and Valeria was supposedly his kids. And so it really was kind of a topsy-turvy type of approach to the Marvel universe. And going through it, as I remember at the end, it was Franklin's powers that basically, once Reed was able to get people to understand really what happened, because Reed and a few others escaped their, I guess it was a 616 universe, and was able to get into into God Emperor Doom's universe and explain to them really what the story was and what Doom was doing. I can remember what clicked at some point, but then Sue and everybody else realized what was happening. I remember he kills off Doctor Strange, who actually knew what was going on.
Yeah, Doctor Strange was one
of them, as I remember now. And so he killed him off, which kind of Sue didn't understand why that happened. People were upset about that. But at the end, it was Franklin basically that was able to put things back the way they were supposed to be. Am I right?
Yeah.
That's what I remember.
Yeah, Franklin was the key behind it all. Him and Molecule Man. And as I recall, they saved the universe by a cheeseburger sandwich was
right, because he was hungry, and Doom wouldn't feed him. I remember that now.
Yeah, and it was Miles that gave him the cheeseburger that just so happens to be in his pocket. I don't get that, but
I remember when you mentioned that. I forgot about that. Yeah, you're right.
I want to see that in film. That's what
that would be kind of cool.
I want to see that scene in film. I think Secret Wars has a lot of potential. I think it was a way to get Battle Worlds, the idea of Battle Worlds, the idea of God Emperor Doom, and really to showcase how powerful Doom really became when there's that one scene where Doom sees Thanos and he just rips his spine off his body to show you how powerful he's become. And that's the idea where again, we're going back to the whole concept about who Doom is. Doom does not see himself as a villain, even though he is a villain. He's very clearly a villain. He would do everything he needs to get done to get the job done, but he does it at the means for him to become the God Emperor. And that was the whole purpose behind Secret Wars. And at the end, a lot of it was just a lot of retconning that was taking place here, or ways to get rid of certain continuities and stuff like that, or to bring Miles into the main line and things like that. I think that's the approach they're going to take towards the movie in some way. They're going to adapt some of that into the movie. Obviously, they're not going to adapt all of it. So we'll see what happens when the movie comes out in 2 years.
It was a really good story. Maybe it went on a little bit more than it needed to. So if they adapted the right way for a movie, I think it'll be quite good. I'm not sure where Doom is going to end up, though, when they get to Secret Wars. I mean, because correct me if I'm wrong, but as I remember in this one, at the end, when everything kind of goes back to the way it's supposed to be, quote unquote, Doom ends back in Latveria, if I remember.
Yeah.
And you were speaking about the fact that in the early Doom things, you never saw his face.
Yeah.
Well, in this one, then he goes and he takes off his mask and he doesn't have any scars or anything. So
yeah, he heals himself.
He heals himself. Yeah. So
yeah,
we'll
see. We'll see how it goes, man. We'll definitely see how it goes. And now we've come to our last book in our list here. Another hidden gem, but I think this one's getting some traction, and that's Fantastic Four Life Story #1. This book came out in 2021 in Marvel Comics. High sale of this book is $95 at a 9.8, and that was in 2024. Last sale of this book was $7 near mint, which is also the fair market value for the near mint. $45 is the fair market value for a 9.8. Believe it or not, there's only 24 copies in the census. Life Story reimagines the team's history in real time across the decades, showing how they would age and face world events while preserving their core family dynamic. So Unstable Molecules is more about the Fantastic Four in a real world environment, where Fantastic Four Life Story is more like Fantastic Four throughout the decades, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. And it tells the story of them within that time frame and how they adapt. A lot of what the movie is being created is taken from this story. So this story is going to be utilized a lot within the movie. Maybe not one for one, but they are going to take elements from this comic book series and they're going to adapt it into the movie in some way. So this is one of those books that I think, again, worth checking out.
Well, I guess I'm going to have to go to my library and read it, because this came out in 2021. And after getting back into comics in about 2004, 2005, I was one of those guys that completist buying up all the stuff like that. And I had to make a decision. And my decision then was, no matter how good something looks, I'm not going to necessarily buy it. And the Life Story, this one looked really good, but it was one of the ones where I stepped back. But I will go and get a copy of it and read it now before I go see the movie, just to make sure I've got this background.
Yeah, you could definitely get a digital copy of the book. I know they're out there, and it's again, like Unstable Molecules, is one that people don't know much about. It has been on trendy lists beforehand, so there is some buzz around this book, but still is very inexpensive. $7 is probably more than you need to pay for. Just look at the census count. There's only 24 copies that have been graded, so people don't care about this book as much.
Right.
But it's definitely one that a lot of the movie is going to take things from this comic book. So that alone gives it a reason to go check it out.
Sounds good. Yeah.
And we've come to the conclusion of, wow, we went through a lot, man. We went through a lot. We've come to the conclusion of these Fantastic Four keys that you should be checking out here. Again, a lot of them are major keys. A lot of them are hidden gems that you really should be checking out, getting an opportunity to either read or grab a copy before they become difficult to get a hold of, and stuff like that. But Joe, it's been a pleasure, man.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be able to be on your channel finally.
I know, right?
But it was great because, especially like the early FFs, I mean, I'm such a big fan. I was, and I learned something about the later ones that I was not familiar with. So that's good for me too.
Yeah. And Joe, where can people find you?
Well, I've got my YouTube channel where I do a lot of kind of deep delving into like Silver Age, Bronze Age, Golden Age type of stuff. I do a lot of history of it, do some AI stuff on that too. So it's just Anachronic Comics. You see it on near my name. And I'm on Instagram, the same, Anachronic Comics, all lowercase and a lower dash between Anachronic and Comics. So you can follow me there as well.
Awesome, guys. And with that being said, we'll see you at the next show. We'll probably put a little poll here. I'm thinking about throwing in some more polls in regarding to the channels and different videos that we keep putting out. Make sure you check out the Go Collect article that'll be dropping very soonly after this video drops. So be on the lookout next week for that. And we got trending, we got 30, 60, 90. We got new comic book day, fresh picks, all that part of the IzzyVerse. Plus, I'm looking forward to getting ready to do some live streams when the summer is over. So I'll have some stuff going on there. Until next time, guys, I'll see you then. And the words of Stan Lee, Excelsior.
Take care.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more comic content. Check out these other videos for even more insight. And I'll see you at the next one. Excelsior.